Hello, everyone. My name is Lori Kirkland. Welcome to the Wired for Wonder podcast, where we look at what the future of work could look like. What does it mean for us as leaders? What does it mean for our employees? And how can we help shape a future of work that better serves humanity? I am honored today to be joined by Mike Shorts, who is the CEO of ITC Manufacturing. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah. Do you want to give the audience just a quick background of kind of who you are and how you got to where you are?
For sure. Yeah, I spent probably the last 25 formal years in manufacturing, starting in the beginning. And ITC is in the kind of metal fabrication business. We have our headquarters are in Phoenix, Arizona. We have a secondary location in Columbus, Ohio. Almost a million square feet of production and storage warehouse space, and our products serve the industrial and commercial storage handling that kind of spreads into the retail market, like the big box stores that you see.
Okay, so that is such a strong background, and I think it's really fascinating when you look at manufacturing background, which is a pretty traditional industry overall, right? There's a lot of very
Very,
tactical
yes.
steps. This is how it's always done. Um, but what are you seeing with the changes AI is bringing, right? It's accelerating a lot of changes. It's giving us this opportunity to look at work differently. In the manufacturing space, Mike, what are you seeing as some trends that may be coming up? And it might include technology or not, but just overall, what are you seeing some shifts that are happening in the manufacturing world?
There's a lot of shifts to me. What also kind of leads into that, in my view, is manufacturing's seen AI and smart things for a long time with machine connectivity, the IoT and all that kind of good stuff. So it's not like it's a foreign thing. It just gets a little more tactical now. That is what is being sold for the most part. I think tactical, repeatable solutions, it's going to change the manufacturing environment. What I'm seeing as a revolutionary thing for manufacturing is being accepting to driving the business at the top end of the business. And that, quite frankly, is where ITC is beginning to invest the majority of our AI dollars first, is to helping us execute decisions on data faster.
Give me a little bit more background. I don't think I understand that. The leading from the business, how did you say that?
Yeah, so what we're trying to build and what I'm trying to come up with on the AI side is essentially building our own AI model based on our data and tech stack uh, that is all of our data. And then it branches out to what I'd say we subscribe to data, and then it will branch out into public data. So a lot of AI now is just built on public data, and you have to kind of do some weird things to only focus on your data, which brings in a huge security risk of
Mm.
how much you put your data out there. So we're doing it from it's our data, it's our tech stack. Let's put an AI model on top of that to help us look at things, 30,000 feet in the air, as me as the CEO and my executive team, to really have data drive our decisions, but have it done in a way that we can get answers in, seconds, not days or weeks, by having, more analysts and stuff. And I look at it from, we're not replacing people, we're just setting this up in a way that we can grow at an exponential rate much more easily and cost effectively.
So if I'm hearing you, what you're saying is you're looking at still scale, productivity, efficiency, all of those things, but you're looking at as AI as a way to actually AI enhanced what your leaders and what your team members are doing rather than looking at as AI as like something over here or a product you should use. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. As our first step, that's kind of how we're tackling this, rather than taking a first step of looking at just what is becoming the traditional chat bots and the agents and things to do that stuff. We will be doing that stuff, but our first investment is really looking from the top down and then seeing kind of what the picture looks like and what we should begin to invest in. Because at the end of the day, we're all hit with 1,000 solutions every day for everything we do without anybody knowing what those solutions and what our business is. So it's just maybe a different approach, but that's how we're looking at that piece, which is
Well,
kind of
I
cool.
love that approach because it's honestly where DeepHumanX plays too. Is we're like, hey, there's a lot of intellectual capital that are within each of your people that has probably through the years gotten lost on standardization and processes. And it's like with AI, like there's this chance to crack open and fix some of the things that are already dysfunctional, but more importantly, get that knowledge out and get those ideas being generated through leadership alignment of teams to determine where you should be putting your money versus just and I don't know if you agree with this, but I know looking at I'm in AI every day, all day, and I'm like, there is not a product out there because that is going to be your silver bullet, because guess what? Nobody knows where AI is, where the tech's going to end in 5 to 10 years. But what is going to stay consistent is that there's humans who understand your business and have intellectual capital around your industry that no piece of tech could ever replace. So why not instead empower them to think differently, get their think about more possibilities and open up more opportunities within their own teams, within you as an executive team overall.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree 1,000%. It's there. I think the disappointing part that I see out there now is I'm afraid people at any level will get sucked into the magic, the silver bullet of, hey, here's the solution. Everyone's got the, we can code anything for you want to solve a problem. But the approach we're ultimately taking is trying to back up and help or have AI help us identify what the actual problem is and then validate it from our human experience and the value add pieces we have in our business, what differentiates us as a company in our market, and begin to strengthen those pieces to begin to focus on those first. So it's just it's a really nice time and dynamic to be in it, with this big phase shift that I see being available to the manufacturing industry that is different than what we've traditionally dealt with just the interconnectivity of equipment to computers and generating data. Now AI can help us look at data and begin to validate what's real, what's not real, what we should, what needs corrections, what doesn't. Because that's kind of where we're at right now in our development is we're looking at the data set and analyzing the data set to understand historically when we didn't have all this stuff, what are outliers, what is normal, what was to be expected, where data went wrong, because our data comes from people hitting keyboards right now and making sure, here's a keystroke, let's input that, let's do this, let's upload a spreadsheet, a CSV file, and I want us to be able to get away from that and really have it connected. And big manufacturing companies are probably doing that, but us in the mid-level space, we haven't been able to invest in that quite the same way that others maybe have. So
well, and it's interesting because looking across, I think there are a few handful of companies that are doing that, but it still really feels like it's the Wild West of companies are almost pre where you are, where they're like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed with what to do. I gave my tech team some budget, but they're not actually looking at it where you are, where it's like, data driven has been a term that's been used, for the last 8 to 10 years. But I get what you're saying with AI. It's like, no, it's actually, I can use the data now. It's not just we're collecting big data, right? And then I get these reports that still match up to the same, I'm still looking at measuring the same things I've always measured. Whereas by shifting and actually working with AI, right, you can actually start to tweak those and make it so that that data becomes accessible and valuable to, like, let's say your role as a CEO, but then your chief revenue officer is going to want to look at that data from a different perspective, or whoever is running your manufacturing side of operations, right? They're going to look at it from a different perspective. And it just feels like, I don't know, maybe even could you give in your words, what have you seen when you say data driven approach, since it is a common term, how do you see it shifting from what has been done to now that you're using AI, how you actually see the difference?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question and angle to kind of look at it. And this is how I'm looking at it and kind of driving how we're setting our own framework for it. So it's I think traditionally the data driven thing is, let's query our system and spit out this monster CSV file, and then have a bunch of people manipulate the data in pivot tables and show us what it says. I'm from the school of thought that, I can take a data set and give it to 5 people and probably get 10 different results and answers out of it when I ask one question. So what we're looking at and what I want us to build out of this is, looking at the data set using AI, but building frameworks within that model that, internally we're kind of calling recipe cards of,
Yeah.
we have a recipe for the finance side of the business based on these thoughts, theories, contemplations. We have one around production, we have one around supply chain, we have one around sales, one around marketing, one around HR. And we use those so they become repeatable questions in analysis and stuff that's built on a subset framework of a data set. So we're getting a consistent type of response within a consistent set of parameters. Because if you ask a question from an HR side to the finance model, you're going to get a different answer than what you would if you were using an HR model. So that's kind of how we're beginning to structure this out from a data set and data integrity standpoint.
So
Does
that's
that make sense?
interesting because it does make sense. And it's really interesting because what I'm hearing you say is you're like actually looking at it like, let's take people from where they are today in their individual departments, but then and they can still gain the benefit from all this data, right? And see what's there. But at the same time, then as an executive, you're also bringing that stuff together so that maybe you with your executive team can look at the data across everything.
Absolutely.
Whereas, let's be real, 8 years ago, it wasn't really easy to look at.
It was
It
not.
was not easy to look at the data. It was easy to collect it, but most companies are at the place where they're like barely using the data that they have. And if they are, it's typically in a fashion that isn't actually setting up a framework to move forward. So I hear you kind of almost not human centered, but in a way you're looking at what are each of the departments doing that's winning, because we want to continue that. And at the same time, how do we give more knowledge to the organization so that it can then make wiser, better decisions, and ideally get rid of some of the stuff that you don't like doing, like inputting data into spreadsheets from one report to another or from one system to another.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, maybe an example I could give is we've just this week gone through, a really massive, somewhat pre-planned surge through sales and contracts that we've converted into business. So, for me and having this AI kind of analysis data set is, as a CEO, traditionally I'd have to ask a question such as, what is the impact of these orders going to have on my supply chain and steel materials coming into our 2 facilities, because these 3 new orders we've received are kind of split between both facilities. So what does that look like? Well, that gets sent to the director of supply chain, and then he's looking at some data, and probably 3, 4, 5 days later, I'm going to get this sort of answer of maybe what we need to do and pivot and where the time frame is. But for me as a CEO now, I'm going to be able to just ask our AI, based on these new orders that these 3 quotes just converted into orders, what effect is that going to have on my supply chain side for steel? And what should I consider for forward-thinking steel purchases, given the tariff situation that continues to happen in the United States? So it will begin to formulate an answer for the health of our supply chain side. It'll be able to look at, the AMM pricing models that are out there for steel, the history, the peaks and valleys and the periods, and it might be able to suggest you're healthy, or I would consider buying ahead of this because I see a trend going up. And that's what I'm hoping that we kind of get out of this thing is now I can make that decision really quickly, and my director of supply chain can make that decision and thought process really quickly to either elevate a decision or, okay, this isn't the major concern we have right at the moment. I can focus on something else this week. I don't have to worry about that one right now. So,
well, one, awesome. Congrats on a surge in sales. I think every one of us loves those weeks. So that's amazing.
Thank you.
And as you were talking, it really had me thinking about kind of some of the changes of you as a CEO. When you have that data available to you to get answers very quickly, like even your question of like, what else should I be thinking about? Right? It's like you have this all of a sudden a partner who's thinking at your level so that you don't have to set context and try to get it. Whereas it's just like, hey, this is the question I'm asking. So you all of a sudden now have ways to interact with the technology that can simplify and save you time. What are some of the benefits that you've seen individually as a leader by having some of that data available to you?
It sets up the ability to either grow faster, more sustainably, and at better margins, because you can maximize all those pieces at the same time, much faster, in my opinion. And but what I'm seeing for us is it's allowing us to get into our planned scaling mode that we're kind of tooling for right now. Is scaling traditionally, you kind of got to do it in a lot of very capital heavy ways and people heavy ways, and then you're still only as good as the knowledge of the people have at the moment, and you're still relying on all that stuff, and it takes longer for humans to learn than you ask the same question to AI, and over 3 or 4 questions it's just learned really quick, and those 3 or 4 questions are in the span of a day. So like for me, it's just the setting up of what it begins to allow companies, manufacturers or not, to grow at a different level than what they're used to, with less, not necessarily less resources, but resources that have a higher integrity of converting and making a better decision within a framework that isn't going to get misinterpreted as something for a different purpose.
Yeah, I like that. And that seems like, right, so beneficial. I feel like every single one of us as individuals are like, oh my God, can I take stuff off my plate? Right? Like when you're just overbooked, it is about like trying to find space and freedom to do that. And what you're giving example of is exactly what AI can do, which is just to bring some different shifts and different opportunities of thinking for all of the humans involved. So as a CEO and talking about bringing all these changes, there's a lot of people involved. There's your leadership team, there's all the different departments and teams. There's just, the people component, like you said, is it learns differently than machines. I don't know if I would necessarily say slower, but it's different. Right. And so how are you managing that component of bringing your organization along, with the kind of the change in thought that you're having and the mindset shift that you have clearly been making, right? Of, hey, I'm going to think a little bit differently than I have about my business traditionally. What are you doing to help really bring the people along?
Well, quite frankly, it's a couple of things. Is first and foremost, I've only been with our company for about 6 months, and in this industry for about 6 months. So it's still a little bit of a learning thing, and I'm building my team because it wasn't there to begin with. So that is cool to be able to build my team and get the people in the right spots. But outside of that, I'm really helping my team and what we're doing of kind of going back to basics and fundamentals in a way, because I never think it's a bad time to not do that and kind of just reset some things. So with a few new players on my team and new expectations within our company and where we're heading, we're starting back with simple things like assessments of who we are and our styles and how we communicate with each other, and seeing where our blind spots are as a team and in pairs and a group, and we can help each other identify where each other is weak and where we got to help each other with. And honestly, that's what's just getting back to that right now is a really nice grounded feeling of we can do this, and collectively, yes, what we're pushing for here, you know what, so and so is really strong with that. Let's bring them in, even though this is not their functional piece to do. They got a lot of experience and knowledge, and they can ground us on doing stuff that can still keep the pace of what's going on. So that's how I'm kind of trying to tackle it a little bit more basics and fundamentals.
I love it. How does that feel to be like going back to that as a leader, right?
To
Like that,
me,
how
it
does that
feels
feel?
great because it's like the stuff that you learn over time in your career that you probably had an experience with, and it's, oh, that was cool, I learned a lot. And but I know myself, like I'm in my early 50s, I've been doing this for 25, 30 years. It's I know myself, but
Yeah.
it's a but what about my team? How can I help my team? And the only way I feel I can help my team if I understand them better than only the way I know my team, and also how I need to pivot to help them be more effective, like truly be more effective, not just how I see it, but how honestly science sees it. I mean, all this stuff is kind of got some strong foundations in how it works, and it's usually fairly accurate in what goes on. So just getting back to it, it just feels good. And I see it with my team. They're like, oh, yeah, that's really good. I didn't see it that way, and they're already shifting in the way some stuff and communication is happening. So it's a nice feeling to feel like your team is really your team and growing and morphing into this really strong entity um, that maybe wasn't a month ago or 3 months ago or 6 months ago.
I
I
mean,
think
that
all
feels
teams could
good.
benefit from that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's interesting. So at DeepHumanX, we focus a lot on the human operating system,
Mm,
which is a lot of what you said, where each of us has a purpose or a relevance or something that drives us. And then, right when we're at work or we're in meetings, we're bringing that with us. But most organizations, right, in the workplace over the last 50 years or so, have kind of been like, that's not important who you are. It's not important, right? Like what your skills are. It's here's your job requirements, just do this truncated part of it. But we're seeing a shift with AI to be like, hey, actually understanding what is important to me, and then as a leadership team what's important to the organization,
mm,
gives individuals like more excitement, more purpose. And not that you're a CEO, so I know you're not going to be like, I'm going to, just want people to be more excited. It's
mhm,
actually that it ends up cutting out a lot of, by people understanding where the organization is, what the human goal is, and being able to align themselves with it. We do it, like I said, through looking at your human operating system, so upgrading that code.
absolutely.
But it really does all of a sudden open up possibilities where you see individuals, you see a lot less burnout, a lot less disengagement, because there's like this innateness in us and humans that we are creative people, even if you don't think you're creative, right? As human beings, we're always doing something new, right?
Yes.
So I really love that example of it, of like really getting back down to kind of that human element. Um, so at DeepHumanX, we have we have the X as the undefined factor that each individual person is motivated by. Could you share with the audience what is your, what's your X factor? What is it that really drives you in your life?
For me, that driver is just change. Honestly, it's the thing that um, I've. It's not that I've always wanted in my life. It's what I naturally gravitate to, and it's happened from the time just from being in high school back in Canada that I absolutely thought I wanted to be an architect.
Hmm.
And, going through and doing drafting classes and design classes when that was actually a thing back in high school, um, in learning and doing things, uh, you know, computers were just starting to come out back in that time because I was doing drafting and all that stuff with pencils and tables and all that kind of cool thing, T-squares. And I look at that change piece and how that evolved. I went from architecture to engineering school in a general engineering first year common program that I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I figured engineering's more for me. And then weirdly, I got into geology and environmental engineering and being part of like Canada's really first environmental engineering program as a discipline. But it was just you do a little bit of everything piece. So that exposure became change. And then the industry I got involved in was change because we touched on every industrial sector that was out there and the products we made. So it was always change. And then I began to learn and study about change. And I really do live the whole like 1% model of just trying to be a little bit better. You figure it out, you get good at it. Now it's time to, how can I be just a little bit better than that was? And it can drive a lot of people around me in my space nuts because it keeps changing. But when people figure me out, it's usually trying to hit that 1%, though there are times when it's far more than 1% because it's just an opportunity to do something cool and different. And that's where AI is fitting into a lot of stuff for us is this is not a 1% change.
Right, exactly. Anyone who's listening, this is big. You, as a leader, you need to realize there's many parts of you individually that are going to have to change, not only the stuff that you're doing. But I think that that's really good advice for people to be thinking about, because that's a different perspective. Many times we find ourselves in like, a role like you're the CEO, you're the leader, you're supposed to know all of the things and have an answer. And so to have an executive who's looking at curiosity and change, like that actually is, such a benefit, especially in this time where, look, everything we know it is changing. All of it's gonna be changing, right? It's not going to be destroyed or anything like that, but it is there. It is an element of change. So I like that. I'm pretty impressed that you're, that is the thing that motivates you. And it means you're always going to be up to curious, fun stuff, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I appreciate that. I look at my role as a CEO of I'm envisioning putting together a puzzle that has no boundaries and straight edges to it.
Right.
So
Oh,
I
that's a
keep I
great
keep
description.
looking at this and going, okay, there's more that is going on up here, but I don't see those pieces yet. So let me find out where those pieces are, and then I'm starting to put together those pieces, and then the puzzle just keeps growing and growing and growing. But traditionally you make a puzzle and you start with all the solid straight line edges, and you build your frame, and then you start working in patterns. I just look at my role as a CEO as building that puzzle kind of outwards and keep going on top of that and seeing where the next piece and stuff is kind of coming from. So
Ah, I
my view.
love that analogy because that's it. Like right in the traditional corporate world or workplace, right? It's, oh, here's the boundaries, here's the puzzle borders, and we are all playing in the same, in the same puzzle block. Like with your direct competitors are playing in there. But what's happening now is I like how you said that the boundaries are shifting. Like you're no longer contained to you only have to play within this, because all of a sudden we have this technology that can jump you way further into a direction that might not have been possible a year ago, because you guys uncovered something that you're really good at with, maybe you figured out with a particular customer that you're really good at this, right? Now you have the technology. Instead of saying, can it be built? It's more of, how are we going to build it? Which is pretty cool.
100%.
So if I were to give you, so this is my last question for you, and this is kind of in the mode of really helping other leaders out there who may not be advanced as you, or maybe further ahead of you, but really just how you would, what would you tell leaders today, right, in this shifting world? What are the top 3 skills you feel people should be working on, developing, so that they remain relevant and impactful in their careers in today's landscape?
Wow, great question. That's 3. It's almost hard to narrow it down to 3 in a way, because it's a lot of competing stuff. But it's, to me, it's remaining open but being grounded in your approach. I think now is the time. The world has talked about networking for so long that it just has sort of become, I think, a little bit of a non-genuine thing. I'm kind of looking at encouraging everybody to genuinely network a little bit more and actually build some of those connections, because you don't know what lies out there. LinkedIn, take the time to make a response to somebody that you feel is not a bot response, that is just being kind of put out there to sell you something. But there are people out there who are genuinely trying to build that and share ideas to do that. And outside of that, I think the other most important thing is just being ready to take a leap. And I kind of shared this idea and something I saw online today, and I just had to share it out in my team. I saw, if you wait until you're ready, it's never going to happen. You're never going to take the leap, because you're never truly ready. There's something that's always happening that's going to pull you back from doing something. And it's kind of how I've evolved in my career. If I always wanted to be ready. So now my kind of percentage where I feel I need to hit to be ready has significantly dropped from where I was a decade ago. And that's what I would encourage anybody in a senior leadership position, is challenge your thought on where your ready point is. And if you're willing to make a leap now at an earlier stage, I think it will put you ahead of where others are, because they're not ready to take that leap yet. So
there is that role and responsibility as a leader. I love that. So the networking, be open to change, is what I was hearing you say. Like, be open to be, or reduce your readiness.
Reduce your readiness. Yes.
Your ready point. Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Well, hey, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today. It's so great to kind of hear your insights and your thinking, and we really do appreciate you kind of sharing some of the things that are going on with you, and we wish you the best of luck. Thanks for joining us today.
This was great. Thank you for having me.